Hey, horror fans, what's up? It's Jay. We're back here at Jay versus Horror. And today, guys, I thought we'd do something a little different. We're going to look through the group now. The group is on Facebook. We got like 26,000 members there. If you're not a member, go check it out. Lots of great horror conversation going on. And so, what we did was we reached out to everybody in the group and we asked if they had any fan questions. And we got quite a few really good ones. And so, we're going to take a look at them and see where it goes. Okay. Now, I was actually pretty impressed with a lot of the questions that we got today. I wonder how this is sounding for everybody, real quick. Let me see if I can check it out, make sure it sounds, because sometimes the sound on here doesn't work the way that I think it's going to. It's happened to me before, actually. So I got to check it out real quick and make sure that it's even working. I don't hear any quick and make sure. Okay, yeah, it's working. It's working. That's good. That's good. That's good. All right, here we go. So, some of the questions we got. The first one was, what would be your dream drive-in lineup, and who would be the guest host? I don't know. Laugh out loud, just throwing up a question. That comes from Steve Rogers inside the group. And great question, Steve. What my dream lineup, drive-in lineup? Wow. For me, I would say a dream drive-in lineup would be The Beyond from Lucio Fulci playing first, and then Possession right after that with Sam Neill and Isabel Adjani. I love those movies. I would have loved to see them when they got originally released, even though Possession didn't make it to America till like 1999 or something. Yeah, I would have loved to see those. And my dream co-host would probably either be, to be on, and I'm just being honest here, it would either be Joe Bob or Darcy. Joe Bob I grew up with. I've listened to this guy talk a million times over the years. I had the movie channel when I was a kid, and he was on there. And then when he went to USA, or what was it, TNT, he went to TNT. uh, yeah, it was great. And but I actually really like Darcy's point of view too. She's got some great insight to horror movies, and she knows a lot about horror movies. So yeah, it would probably be one of them. If it wasn't one of them, it would be one of my buddies. It'd be one of the people that I've worked with in the past, something like that. Uh, Ben Quaylen says Joe Bob Briggs is the man. Hell yeah, Joe Bob is the man, and he's been the man for a long time. And I don't think really people understand his total impact on horror movies. He's helped get some horror movies made. His reviews of horror movies have often been the only good review of that horror movie. So yeah, Joe Bob's done a lot for horror, and I've always loved to hear his opinion, even when I don't agree with it. I like to hear how he thinks. Right. So let's move on. Our next question comes from Nicole Wilson. Nicole says, "Are there any horror movies that have seriously kept you up at night?" Not in a long time. Now, when I was a kid, yeah, The Exorcist used to keep me up at night. If I tried to close my eyes and I would see Reagan's face, I was done for that portion of the evening, because I got started on horror movies early. I'm 41 now, so I've been a fan for over 30 years. And I got started early on them, and I wasn't scared of much like the other kids were when the other kids were like the same age as me. I had seen more than they had already because my parents were fans too, and my grandmother was a fan of even the old Universal movies. So yeah, there hasn't been much that's kept me up since The Exorcist. The Exorcist kind of freaked me out when I was a kid because I was religious then. I'm not now, but then yeah, it freaked me out because it was like, to me, it was the one supernatural thing that I thought you genuinely needed to be worried about. I knew Freddy was never coming for me, that Jason wasn't going to get me or anything like that. But yeah, I was worried about demons and the devil and stuff like that. How that played out. But yeah, so that would be the last one that really kept me up. Now, has a movie scared me, or I don't know if I would say scared or terrified me, but the film Terrified from 2017, the supernatural horror film, uh, Spanish language film, that freaked me out pretty good. That was a good one. It had a lot of great elements in it, and they've done a lot of the same supernatural elements over and over. In my opinion, like The Conjuring and Insidious and stuff like that, they brought back the big Amityville type film, right? Um, And so with that, we had a lot of people that ripped that off and things like that. So it got kind of stale for a while. I think Terrified was a new vision of supernatural horror, and yeah, they're supposed to be doing an American remake and an English language remake. Those sometimes they turn out okay. Let Me In was all right, but sometimes they don't. Like the French films they tried to remake in English language, Martyrs and Inside, those didn't turn out too good, right? But sometimes they do turn out all right. The Ring, The Grudge, they were okay. So we'll have to wait and see. I think Guillermo del Toro's involved in it, so that's a plus. That always helps. Uh, DJ, I think it says Dupuy on yeah, right here on the live chat says he's got you beat. He's 56, starting to watch horror movies since I was 3. And thrillers. Yeah, man, that's awesome. Uh, Chiller thriller. Yeah, that's cool, man. You got a lot of knowledge. Sometimes I have to refer back to my buddies. Like people say, what qualifies me to even do this? What I do, I talk about horror movies all the time, basically 5, 6, 7 times a week. And basically, the only thing that really qualifies me to do it is I'm a horror fan. I've been a horror fan for over 30 years. I worked for Movie Pilot Horror when they were up and running. I wrote for them, had like 360,000 readers at one point before they closed the doors there and went back to Germany. Uh, so yeah, I mean, and I've been running horror groups since Facebook started letting people run horror groups. I've been to all the conventions. I've done some interviews with people. I mean, I don't know what qualifies me other than I really love horror movies, and you're very rarely ever going to hear me talk bad about any of them, just because I love them all so much, and I realize that even the ones I don't like mean a great deal to many people. So yeah, I'm more about recommending movies I like, talking about things I like to talk about with the genre, than running stuff down. Our next comment on the live feed comes from Ben Quaylen. It says, "Used to like Gilbert Godfrey on USA Up All Night." Oh yeah, man, that was a blast. Also Grandpa Munster on TBS on Saturdays. That was a lot of fun. Uh, so that was Nicole's question. Have any more horror movies kept me up at night? One time, I was in a creepy old house, right, and I was watching Paranormal Activity 2. Now the movie wasn't that great. Really, the only one I liked in the Paranormal Activity franchise is probably Part 3. But yeah, I was watching Paranormal Activity 2 and I heard something and then I saw something out of the corner of my eye and I got a little freaked out that time. Uh, Not that I believe in ghosts and things like that. I just, it seemed like something was very odd in that place. And I got a little creeped out. It wasn't because of the movie, but the movie wasn't helping the situation. I can tell you that. And DJ Japoy says, "What is your qualification? What that is what your qualifications are? Loving horror movies." Yeah, that's it, man. I love horror movies. I love all different kinds. But if there is a question or something that I don't know, and I'll be real honest with you, I'm kind of like Dr. Sam Beckett from Quantum Leap. If it happened in my lifetime, I was born in 1980, early 1980. So if it happened from then till now, I'm very knowledgeable about all of that. I'm pretty much obsessively knowledgeable about that kind of stuff. But everything before that, I start to fall back a little bit. But I do have friends who are very knowledgeable in those categories that I've worked with on other podcasts and things like that. So I always know somebody to ask if there's a question that I can't answer. So I won't lie to you and tell you that I know the answer, but I do know someone who does know the answer. So there we go. Uh, and the next question comes from LaShawn Bryant. And the question is, do you think horror movies are losing their originality? I don't think so. To be honest with you, I really don't think so because I don't think people realize, first off, the massive amount of horror movies that are coming out every year right now. In the last 10 years, there's been a boom. I'm talking, there's probably 300 horror movies a year coming out right now. And, not all American made films, of course, for foreign horror films and stuff, but it's hard to keep up with. It used to be, back in like 2008, 2009, I had to watch about 75 films a year and I'd make a list of about my top 20 or something. And as the years have gone on, I've reached out to where I'm trying to watch 350 to 400 movies a year to make a list that's the top 100. And people are like, that's ridiculous. The top 100, it's not ridiculous when there's this massive output of movies. So, no, I don't think originality is gone. I think a lot of things are derivative. I think most things are derivative. It's hard not to be. It's hard not to be influenced by all the things you've seen that you loved, that made you want to go be a filmmaker, right? It's hard not to be influenced by that stuff. I don't think it's a matter of necessarily every idea has to be original. I think it's more like you need to be able to come up with your own idea of that idea. That sometimes works better than trying to be totally original anyway, right? And where it gets dangerous is where you see these films that try to put in three or four successful elements from other films, and they try to realign them to make some kind of successful film because it's formulaic. That's a problem. I think you see that a lot with zombie films. There's a lot of zombie films, even the ones that try to be funny, where they're doing the same thing. They think they're not, but they really are doing the same thing over and over again. Uh, so yeah, I think do I think that originality is gone? No. Look, the remake question, that's not a thing for me, okay? Because human beings have been remaking everything since the beginning of time, okay? Like there's probably still 200 performances a year of Hamlet, right? They everything that Shakespeare did, there's actors that train in Shakespearean plays, and then they're training in the shadow of other great actors who have trained in that, and thousands of people have said those lines. And so, every great character throughout history, whether it's even, not to belittle religion or anything, but, even Jesus Christ has been portrayed several times by different actors. And James Bond, Dracula, Sherlock Holmes, if the character is iconic, if the story is iconic, people are going to tell it again and again. That's been that way since people were sitting around campfires telling stories. Okay, they're going to tell the same stories over and over. I don't worry about remakes, sucking originality out of Hollywood. I think there's still a lot of smart young filmmakers out there. We just saw some great films this year. Benson and Moorhead did Sin Chronic. Brandon Cronenberg did Possessor. You could argue that those films weren't perfect, but at least they were original in their own way. And yeah, so I don't think originality is gone. I think it gets a little buried up because look, we're really looking at a situation where even before the pandemic, I would say probably only 10% of the movies that I talked about every year came out at the theater. Most of them were independent films that went through festivals and then came out later on. And so out of that 10% that were hitting the theaters, that's where your remakes and stuff like that are, right? So it's a very small percentage anyway. Maybe 1 in 10 that hit the theater, or 2 in 10 that hit the theater are remakes. And so you're really looking at maybe 5 or 6 remakes a year. It seems like a lot because they always shoot for the classics that we love. And it often comes out ugly, and sometimes it comes out, it's really hard to live up to something that somebody already loves. When they have something to compare it to, it's very hard. We're seeing that right now with the Stan miniseries. Ben says, we were both at a perfect time between classics and more classics. 1983 here, yeah, great, period of horror. I know, I hear people praise the 80s all the time. I think there's some hidden gems in the 90s, and I think we hit another big boom around 2006, 2007 that lasted, is still lasting. But yeah, now Hugh Rosser had 2 questions. One was the best Easter egg you found on a DVD. Now, I'm not sure about this question because I don't know if you mean like the packaging or the special features or what. So I'm going to skip that one. I will say this, my favorite DVD that I ever bought was probably around, I'm going to say 2006 or 7 or something. It was Final Destination 3. I remember that. And the movie's, it's fine. It's a decent movie in that franchise. But the DVD was super cool because when you watched it, you could select whether the people died or not. And if you selected that you didn't want them to die, they would give you an alternative scene where the person lived. And it was really interesting the way you could make the movie play out. So, yeah, that was one of my favorite DVDs. Uh, Now, Blu-rays would be different. Blu-rays are pretty cool. They've got more features usually. But his second question was, do you think UK horror films can match US horror films? Now, that's an interesting question. I'll uh, I'll say that I think every country puts at least a few good horror films out a year, right? America, we produce a lot of horror films because we have a rich independent scene and a very vibrant, like straight to video scene. Even some movies that are considered bad by most people, but we make them at a massive rate. Now, I would say the UK. I've seen a lot of activity out of Ireland in the last few years where they're making some really great horror films. Uh, there's great directors in England like Ben Wheatley and stuff like that. They just don't get enough press. Their movies don't get enough press. The movies that are made in England don't get enough press. I talk about stuff like Inbred or something like that, and people don't know what I'm talking about. To me, it's just as good as some of those Lesser Hills Have Eyes type movies, but people don't know what I'm talking about when I say Inbred. And I think it's partly because there's a lot of large studios in England, right? And they cultivate films from other places. There's a lot of films that, we call them American, but we go to England and shoot them in a big ass studio. And, it's an American director, American film crew, all that stuff, but they're in England when they make these movies. And so I think maybe facilitating other countries to make movies has probably hurt them a little bit as far as making their own movies. They need Britain. I think needs to make more independent movies and more independent movies. There's lots of great voices out there that need to be heard, and they're just not probably getting the money that they deserve to make the movies they need to make. So, yeah, that's what I would say about that one. I've seen some interesting stuff from Ireland and Scotland in the last few years, though. Um, El Mark Makito. I'm sorry, buddy, if I said that wrong. Greetings from San Diego, California. What's your favorite Tales from the Crypt episode? My favorite all-time Tales from the Crypt episode is Dig That Cat. He's Real Gone with Joey Pantoliano and Robert Wool. It's my favorite. My second favorite is The Man Who Was Death, which is actually the first episode. It has William Sadler in it. Dig That Cat, He's Real Gone is the third episode of the first season. Absolutely my favorite episode. Now, I have a lot of other favorites. Of course, Death of Some Salesman with William Begley and Tim Curry is a favorite of mine. I have all 93 episodes up here on the channel if you guys want to watch them. I watch them repeatedly all the time. So, yeah, great question there. Uh, Hi X wants to know, what do you think of the Wishmaster movies? I was a little disappointed with the first one. I'll be honest with you. When I went to see it at the theater when it came out, I just was, interested in the concept of it. And I knew it had a bunch of horror legends in it. And I went to see it. I was a little, I liked the opening of it. I liked that whole concept where the genie did all this crazy stuff and was killing everybody. But then it seemed to kind of slow down. I actually kind of liked the sequels a little better because they were marketed as like cheap, cheesy movies, and they were a little bit better than most of the cheap, cheesy movies that were coming out then. So, yeah, that's a great question. Uh, well, I'm getting a lot of questions here instead of. Let's see here. Let's go back. There we go. Do you think Hollywood tries harder at Halloween, or are they constant year round? I don't know. I don't understand their thinking. I mean, how many times in the past have we seen a horror movie, uh, a big horror movie like The Conjuring or something like that will come out in August, and it's a weird time because it's like, okay, August, you have that whole month where it's really going to play well at the theater, and maybe a week or two after that, but it's not going to play all the way great till Halloween probably from there, and it's not going to make it out to Blu-ray by that amount of time. So it's a weird thing. I've noticed something that they do is they will flood the market with crap sometimes around Halloween. Stuff that they don't want to theatrically release. If it's getting close to Halloween and you see a horror movie and it's got a even mildly big star in it, and you're like, why haven't I heard of this? The reason why is because it's screen tested poorly. Uh, Everyone knew it was a flop, and they just decided to push it out at Halloween for video on demand to see what they could get out of it, right? So they do that quite a bit, I would say. Uh, Greetings from San Diego. Okay, the Tales from the Crypt episode one. If you haven't already checked it out, 30 Coins series on HBO. I haven't checked that out yet. I will. Thanks for the recommendation. Love the DVDs for Finally D. How You Will Die game is awesome. Okay. Um, yeah, so some great comments there. Now, comic comes also from Hugh Rosser, and it says, best werewolf film ever. Best werewolf film ever? That's an interesting question. Probably my favorite to rewatch over and over is American Werewolf in London. I'm also a big fan of like the Ginger Snaps movies. I'm a big fan of the original Wolfman. I wasn't so much of a fan of the remake they did back in 2010 or 11, whenever it was. But yeah, the original Wolfman, Lon Chaney Jr., I think is hard to beat, as far as being just iconic. There's a great film from the 60s that some people turned me on to a couple years ago called The Curse of the Wolfman. Of see, I said there are areas where I'm weak, and that's one of them. When you go further back, and Curse of the Wolfman with the or Curse of the Werewolf, I think with oh, I'm blanking on the guy's name right now, and he's so synonymous with crazy performance. Oh, Oliver Reed, yeah, Oliver Reed. Great film. Of course, I'm a fan of Silver Bullet, but I guess for me, if it's something, if you're asking me what I'm going to watch the most, it's going to be American Werewolf in London. Uh, Thomas Allen wants to know, what are your thoughts on how PG-13 rating impacted horror films? Well, it is interesting because we know why they do it, right? We know that they will shoot something down to get to that PG-13 because that opens the audience for them. It opens it up to where more parents are willing to take their kids. More kids can get in on their own and stuff like that. So it creates the opportunity for a bigger audience. But it's a dangerous game when you're doing it with the horror genre, right? Because horror fans then get compromised because we want our stories to be rated R. I mean, they don't have to be great, but I want the director to have the ability to take it wherever he wants to. And if he wants to take it to an R-rated place, I want to see where he wants to take it. I don't want it to be, you know, watered down so everybody can take a drink. I don't necessarily like that. And I think that's something that studios don't get is that when they make that compromise to open up a movie where, 14-year-old kids can go out on dates or in groups together to watch a movie, when they do that, they are compromising the original fan base, which is horror fans. So I don't know. It's a mishmash. I'm not gonna slam every PG rated horror film. That's not the case. There are some decent PG-13 rated horror films out there. It's for me a matter of whether I think it fits the story or not, or whether I just feel like I'm being force fed something that's not as good, because they wanted to be able to give it to more people. Uh, the werewolf question, Ben Quaylen says The Howling 2. DJ says opinion. Who do you think is better, the older horror movies or the newer horror movies? I don't think any of them are better. I think I have a nostalgic love for a lot of the old horror films because those are my favorites. They're the ones I saw first. But I don't think there's bad. People want to say new horror films are bad or there's not as good or as many good ones. There are, man. You really just have to watch. There's hundreds of horror films coming out of every country around the world every year. They are still doing great horror films, and I think you go back and you watch some of those older horror films. If you're really honest with yourself about them, some of them are cheesy, man, and some of them are a product of an era. They weren't an original idea. They were a you know basically reactionary film. Something else was very successful, so they made this, and it has just a smaller twist on it than the original thing that they're trying to rip off. So it's not really as great as it seems when you go back and really, pick it apart. And I hate to pick those movies apart because, when I was a kid, one thing I hated was critics like Siskel and Ebert when they would watch a horror movie and pick it apart. And if you're really a horror fan, though, that never bothered you. Because if you saw Siskel and Ebert or somebody like that tear apart a horror film, that just encouraged you to go watch it because you knew what they were about. It did hurt the films for, I guess wider audiences when they're getting ripped apart and people are telling them not to go see it. But for the diehard fans out there, I don't think it made that much difference. So the next one is it's a similar question here. It's from Gialamu Hendricks. Sorry, buddy. What decade had the best horror soundtracks? It's an interesting question, and I'm going to say it's an interesting question for a couple reasons. One, because a lot of the soundtracks from today have great older music in them, right? But ultimately, I guess I'll go with the 80s just because Maximum Overdrive, ACDC's Maximum Overdrive soundtrack, and it's hard for me for anything else to really get close to that soundtrack. I know there's a lot of great soundtracks from the 70s, films like Argento's Deep Red, Suspiria, they have great soundtracks. Uh, even The Exorcist, man, the creepy music that plays in it is definitely it's interesting how many different creepy kinds of music you can have, and each one of them be signature pieces to that franchise. You have Halloween, The Exorcist, Psycho, all these iconic scores that are very even though they're all dark and thrilling, their signature to their own franchise. So I always thought that was very interesting. Uh, do you compare the fancy graphics to the Hitchcock type of filming? Well, I'll say this: I've been slow on warming up to CGI, but I have warmed up to it a little bit. You have to realize those people are artists too. It's still an art form, even though it's probably not evolved to the point where it's greatest, or maybe it never will evolve to that point. Maybe it's that kind of thing that it can't evolve to that type or to that point. But they are artists, and I do appreciate some CGI, and I appreciate it, especially more than horror films. Probably movies like Iron Man and Captain America, stuff like that, where you have these great comic book sequences, action sequences that you could never see without CGI. Back in the day, that's why something like Spider-Man looked so cheesy. Back in the '80s and stuff like that, because they could just do, here's a shot of him on a wall, here's a shot of him over here. Now you can do the whole thing where you can show them doing these big superhero acts, and you don't have to cut away from it and then cut back to trick the audience. So I appreciate CGI for that. I think it's misused in horror a lot. It's the problem. It's misused in horror, and I think it's definitely it's part of the future. So yeah, we have to grab onto it and figure out how we want it to work, or where it works in the horror genre. I'm always going to be a practical effects guy. I just think there's so much artistry in practical effects, and so much. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, right? Well, a lot of these guys, from Fulci to Savini and everybody in between, and up until the '90s, really, they had to create a way to show you what they were trying to make you see. It wasn't as simple as like punch it up on the screen and let's see what we can do with that, and darken this over here. It wasn't like that. They had to create an effect, an illusion, almost like a magician. So yeah, it's really hard for me, just with nostalgia and everything, not to gravitate towards that. But so yeah, we had some great questions there. There's some more questions in the group here. Uh, Jillian McAndrew is asking people their thoughts on Urban Legend. I just rewatched Urban Legend 2 the other night. Don't ask me why. It was on Tubi. I thought, why not? It's not terrible. I still love the original. I think the second one's not that bad. They're reactionary films. Scream came out. It was hugely successful. So you got to know what you did last summer, and then later on Urban Legend, and then Valentine and Cherry Falls and stuff like that. But I like the idea of urban legend. I like the idea behind it, that somebody's going around killing people due to these urban legends. Trying to stick to them, and I think it works. Especially the death scenes and stuff like that works. Not all the stuff in between works. Some of the actors aren't that great in the second one. The first one is like an all-star cast, but yeah. So for me, if I was going to judge Urban Legend out of 10, the first one I'll give 7 out of 10. That's a little bit of nostalgia there. It's probably worth about a 6.5. And the second one I would probably give 6 out of 10. It's worth a watch. It's a decent slasher from that era. They made worse, trust me. So favorite Scott Workman wants to know favorite movie or series, not a documentary, based on a real life serial killer, or name one they should make a movie about. That's an interesting question. I would say Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, but a lot of that film isn't necessarily what went down with Henry. So that's kind of, I don't know if you want to include that one or not. Uh, but other than that, they don't make a lot of serial killer films because of the issue that they have with the victims of the families and stuff. When those victims, the families of the victims, those people are still around and they don't want to hear the details about how their loved ones were murdered and have them glorified and stuff like that. But I would say if you haven't seen it, check out Dahmer. I think it's from like 2002 or 2003. Stars Jeremy Renner. It's before Jeremy Renner was a big star, and you could see in his performance that he was going to be a big star. He channels Dahmer in that film. It's probably the best film about Dahmer. And of course, Zodiac is a great film. That's probably one of the best films of the last 2 decades, honestly. And it's a great film. I wish it was a little more. I just wish we had more information. There's so much information we don't have about the Zodiac Killer that, oh man, that movie just makes you salivate, want to know more, and you really don't get it. But there's so many great performances in it. and David Fincher's great. So yeah, that's another one. Zodiac. Uh, moving on. Tony Hammer Dearden says favorite chase scene where they don't make it. Okay. Oh, that's an interesting one, right? Yeah, he's got Sarah Michelle Gellar from I Know What You Did Last Summer. That's a pretty good one. That's a decent one. Yeah, I would definitely think about going with that one. Favorite chase scene where they don't make it, man. Um, how about everybody in Predator? um, that's a good one. Trying to think of a chasing. Like it's not a chase scene per se, but it's a very like a stalking scene. I would say Tom Skerritt in Alien. I love that scene, man, where he's in the vent and they're telling him that it's all around him and he can't see it, but he's starting to get scared and he's freaking out. He's trying to figure out how to get away from there. Yeah, I love that one a lot. So moving on. Great questions. I mean, these guys really came through with all these questions. Um, and we get a lot of response in Jay versus Horror. So if you're not a member there, it's on Facebook. Go check it out. Jay versus Horror. Like some of these questions that people ask and just stuff they posted, they're getting 6, 7, 8,000 people reacting to their post, 300 likes, 80 comments, 200 comments, just all kinds of crazy stuff. Um, and most of the stuff is just like people talking about films that they really love. This one is from Simon Easton. Says, "I'm going to the experts. What are the best clown horror films of all time? I own Stephen King's It and It Chapter 2." Okay, for me, I like the one clown. I don't remember who directed it, but I know Eli Roth produced it from a few years back. That was a pretty interesting film, man. They went there. I was wondering, when I got it, are they going to go there? Is this guy going to eat a kid? So yeah, that was a fun movie. Also, Stitches, I thought was a fun movie. I cannot remember that guy's name. Ross something right now. He's a comedian over in Ireland, and he's hilarious as Stitches the Clown. A very fun clown horror film. There's another one called A Hundred Tears from a few years ago. It is terribly cheesy, but it is still a great watch. Of course, you got to give some love to Captain Spaulding from Three from Hell and mostly The Devil's Rejects. He was in it, House of Thousand Corpses a little bit. Uh, but yeah, so those would be some of the best. I'm sure there's a ton more, man. Honestly, like I saw one recently called Torment. It's in an Unearthed movie. So if you know anything about Unearthed, you know what I'm talking about. It's called Torment, and it's based on the John Wayne Gacy stuff. I guess this would have been a good one for the other question about serial killers. But it's intense, man, and it is extremely disturbing. Okay, it's got a lot of rape and disgusting stuff in it. It's horrible to think that anybody lived through all that stuff. The truth is, somebody probably did though. And these guys, I don't know, a lot of it actually came from the Gacy thing. So yeah, that was, I mean, that was scary in a different way. Now it's not supernatural, but it's scary, all right. So more comments. Ben says I wasn't really into the Scream-esque films, but I don't hate them. Yeah, some of them are all right. Some of them missed the mark. And so a question that I asked the other day was, "Who's your favorite villain of the last decade in horror?" And I went with Mark Duplass from Creep and Creep 2. Uh, I love those movies. I love to try to sit here and watch one and think, what the hell is this guy thinking? That's what I'm trying to figure out is what he's thinking. Because it's all a game from the get go. From the first time you meet this guy, the first word he says to you, it is a game, and it usually ends in you filming your own murder. And yeah, I love Creep. It's like a new age type of Hannibal Lecter thing for me. He's not the same as Hannibal Lecter, but he's an intelligent psychopath that interests me. So I chose him, and we had several great answers throughout this question here. Over 46 answers. Um, some people said Art the Clown from Terrifier. That's a decent one. I didn't hate that movie. I loved it. I like it for what it is. It's not trying to take itself seriously. It's trying to be like a B level horror movie slasher, and that's just what it goes for. I thought it took some interesting turns and made some interesting choices. Not terrible. Um, Jacob McKee says Krampus. That's an interesting one. I kind of just, I don't know. Every time I watch that, I feel like it's a kids movie. Russell De Silva, our friend from India, says Stephen Lang and Don't Breathe, John Goodman and 10 Cloverfield Lane, and Art the Clown and Terrifier. All great choices. Really love Goodman's performance in 10 Cloverfield Lane. Stephen Lang also and Don't Breathe. It just, there are times when I guess I'm getting old because I kind of identify with Stephen Lang, not the crazy rapey stuff he did, but the fact that he was gonna, get rid of these damn kids that were trying to rob him. That didn't bother me too much. But then when he went, of course they had to add this extra plot element that goes off the rails, so we have a reason to then not like him, and now we're supposed to identify with the kids, right? That was the big switch up in the movie. I was like, I wish they had just left it the way it was and had him pick them off, But so the next question, I don't understand that one, so we'll go on. Marty Fleming says a little over 10 years ago, but he was incredible in the first film, and he's talking about the doctor. Can't remember the guy. Dieter, is it Dieter Later or something like that? I cannot remember. Dieter Laser or Laser? I don't remember. Cannot remember this guy's name off the top of my head. That's my bad. That's something I should definitely know. But yeah, the doctor from Human Centipede, the original one. I freaking love the original Human Centipede. I wasn't a huge fan of part two, and part three was just like ridiculously bad. So I didn't really care about part three that much. But yeah, the original one, and people rip it all the time. And I'm like, hey, man, that's actually a good, solid horror film. It's got classic horror elements to it. And it's got, some of the most horrifying scenes of all time. To me, the ending of this movie, the original Human Centipede, is just terrifying, man. It's like terrible. One of the better answers that I thought we got was from Michael Clapperton first. He said it first. Several people said it. Rose the Hat in Doctor Sleep. I thought she was amazing. Yeah, she's terrifying. Very, she does terrible things to kids. So it's really, you can't identify with her much at all. Uh, the crazy guy in Green Room, says Jamie McMillan, the crazy guy in Green Room that killed the girl in the beginning. Yeah, I was like, yeah, he was a big creepy guy. And then Candlepeel says Michael from the 2018 Halloween. I guess that's kind of a loophole to get Michael Myers back in, but that's fine with me. We love Michael Myers here. Kevin Patterson says that's a tough one. I would go for Rebecca Ferguson as Rose the Hat or Chin Min Silk as the serial killer. And I saw the Devil Man. That's a good one too. Great choice there. That movie is awesome. If you've never seen I Saw the Devil, it's definitely a must see horror film. Rob McCardle says Bagul from Sinister. That was an interesting choice. Ben Stark agreed with Mark Duplass, but also added that Patrick Stewart's character in Green Room works. The intruder from Hush is also terrifying, and he would be my top choice. I think those are pretty good choices, right? So just to look at, a lot of people agreed with me here. Jerry Steinhauer says Victor Crowley from the Hatchet films. That's a great answer. Tony Moss says Sigourney Weaver from In the Cabin in the Woods. Yeah, she was good. And that's Jason Andrews says Chrome Skull from the Late Arrest series. Adam Champion says Art the Clown. DeAndre Walker says Adrian Griffin from The Invisible Man. That was a pretty good one. Yeah, great pick there, DeAndre. And so yeah, some great picks here. If you read through them, they're just all pretty damn good. Some people didn't quite get the question, but Garrett Payne was our last answer, and he had a good one here. He said Black Phillip from The Witch. So that's a very interesting one for villain, right? Villain of the last decade. So, there's not too many there that have really made a splash, but some of them have. A few. So, guys, that's all we got for today. We answered some questions. Just kind of wanted to see how it goes, and everybody was nice enough to leave some questions. I've only had that up there for 3 hours, so yeah, the 20 or so 25 questions we got in that amount of time, I was pretty happy with. Basically, just testing the waters to see how it works because the ultimate goal is to get a panel together, people from the group, members from the group, other podcasters, other creators from other stuff, and have these random questions just uh, rapid fire. Uh, go into everybody in a roundtable situation and get everybody's thoughts and comments on horror. That's what that's how you appreciate the genre. You talk about the films you love, you talk about the concepts, the ideas you love, the stories, and try not to be so negative, right? Talk about the things we like. So I love the questions today, guys. I thought they were great, really well thought out stuff, and some of them gave me a little pause. I didn't think I was going to have pause unless it was a question about an old Hammer film or something that I hadn't seen. But great questions today, guys. And I want to thank the live audience too. You guys were great. We got lots of comments and questions on the live audience today. So we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep doing it. I don't know exactly how we're going to title it, if it's going to be the same every time. But what we're going to try to do is, it seems like it went well today. We're going to bring in a panel. We're going to put together a panel with some of the best horror minds and fans out there. And we're going to let you guys pick the questions and we'll go around the table and get everybody's answers. And it'll be a lot of fun. So thanks for watching today. As always, we love you guys and we will talk to you the next time we have something more to talk about. Bye.